This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 10OFF, TENOFF, for a 10% discount at portlanddistro.com. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Everything Went Black. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. Support has been great. I want to thank all the Patreon supporters out there. I feel like every couple of weeks we get a bunch of new people joining. This week, the infamous Matt Bacon joins us of Bacon Bits, and he gives us a very unique, modern perspective on what it is to promote your own music. Any of you guys who are in bands, I urge you to check out his Instagram account, Bacon Bits, and twice a day he gives some really valuable information. Before we get going, I want to give a shout out to the other horsemen of the podcasting apocalypse. So once you finish this episode, be sure to check out the rest of the shows. On Monday, we have Brandon Legion, who brings us Horror Wolf 666. On Tuesday, we have the premier metal podcast. Of course, that is Into the Necrosphere, presented to you by Jackie Smith. Wednesday is Everything Went Black, which you're listening to right now. And I'm back on Thursdays, Necro Thursday, with Mike Scandato or Jeff Kashid, and sometimes all three of us, to talk about horror movies. On Sunday, my cohort, Carl Hikara, brings you Soul Knocks. We've been doing a collaboration recently called Darkness Weaves, where one episode comes out on his podcast and one comes out on Everything Went Black. And we're going through the work of Carl Edward Wagner, a seriously overlooked author that worked within the realm of dark fantasy, weird fiction, and horror. And we're going through the entire work of this guy. It's in the beginning. We have 2 episodes out. So check out both of our shows to get the full story. I'd like to thank everyone once again who has joined the Patreon. And if you want to support the show for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to weekly bonus content brought to you by myself and Ralph Schmidt. There's also a whole host of other things that we do on there. There's shows that are only available on the Patreon platform. There's previews of upcoming music, like that sort of stuff. $5 a month. You get early access to the regular stream shows as well as the bonus material. And for $25 a month, you can sponsor the podcast. That means I will give you 1 ad read per month for your business, your project, your band, whatever. Even if it's your own podcast, I will give you a spot read at the head of each of one episode per month. Also, I always forget to say this. Please follow us on social media. There's an Everything Went Black Instagram. We're on Facebook. And also, leave us a review. 5-star, if you will, on Apple Podcast or wherever you stream your media. Dude, I honestly am interested in really just what you do, because we're in this modern world of in unconventional promotions. Let's call it this, use this term. We'll coin this term.
Sure.
All right. And guys from like the old school, like me, we don't really have a handle on how to communicate with people in this new world that we're all enjoying right now. And I feel like, younger people like yourself, who are into cool stuff, have like a better handle on that sort of thing. And I just want to educate myself. Sure. And also there's people that listen to this that are in bands, and just kind of get a feel for this whole thing. And also just how it seems very innovative, the kind of thing that you're doing. You know what I mean?
Is it?
I mean, to me it does. I mean, I think you're, well, I'll let you just, get into it, like what your background is and how you came
Sure.
up with this idea and like all that sort of business, you know. And
We'll get into it. Yeah.
honestly, dude, I feel like I don't even really know how I know you, but I just know you. You know what I mean? It's
I
like,
think we met at Psycho California a million years ago.
yeah, okay, sure. I just remember seeing you around and being like, oh yeah, that's Matt. You know, it's a dude. And then like and then when the last memory I really have of being like, oh, that's Matt. You know, was in France at
Oh
Hellfest,
yeah,
and I think
yeah.
you were there with Exhorter, I think, right?
I was. Yes, I remember that day. That was the day we bumped into Dave Mustaine. And we were like, is Dave Mustaine dying?
Dude, Dave Mustaine looked so just pale, and he looked like someone had like dehydrated him or something.
No, because I remember like I remember exchanging looks with you and Vinny, and it was like that thing of like, did we just watch someone dying?
Yeah, and he had like all these people around him too, you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, man,
Like,
you know, this is crazy, you know.
I mean, I have like a whole Dave Mustaine thing, but that's probably not for today.
No, we don't want to
Or for
slam.
the public record.
Yeah, we don't want to slam Dave too bad because he is, you know, an innovator and he's a guy who's important to everyone. And
Oh, 100%.
you know, and I have nothing but respect for the guy. You know what I mean?
For me with Dave, it's more like I think I always forget how big he is.
Yeah. Well, a lot of that has to do with how much he complains about the lack of success.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I think we forget that. Like, oh, Dave Mustaine is like bigger than Killswitch Engage or something.
Yeah. Yeah, because
who you think of as like a successful metal band.
Because he has the violin out all the time, you know what I mean? And you know,
exactly.
I was in Metallica and like all this stuff, and then you're like, oh, poor Dave, you know, like he's not getting his roses on this, you know. But then
you look at his house and you're like, oh right, fuck you.
Yeah, I don't feel bad for the guy, you know, not at all. So you know.
Anyway, yeah, let's do this thing.
Yeah. So yeah, dude, your background. Like I know a little bit about what you do. I mean, I've seen you on on Instagram primarily because I am not a TikToker, but my understanding is that all of your video work, your 1 minute videos, originate on TikTok. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a little out of laziness, to be clear. So the way I do a lot of this stuff is I just create everything on TikTok because it has like better video editing tools or whatever.
Right.
And then I cut them to I just download them and throw them up on Instagram. You know, that's purely because I'm lazy and I just don't feel like doing it in a separate platform and whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting though, because you know, initially the Bacon Smiths videos, my minute long, sort of 4 times a day daily advice videos. Initially they were on Instagram, and I was only doing one a day, and that sort of idea had generated from a partner of mine. I was like, hey, you know, like I heard this thing that if you make a video every day, like, are you talking to the camera, giving advice? Like after a year, your life will change. And after a year of doing it, I was speaking at a conference in Norway, and a bunch of crazy shit started to happen in my life. So, you know, and so basically with all of this, to circle back, you know, the idea is really like, oh, hey, like I'd been involved in the sort of heavy scene, specifically black metal and hardcore, from the age of about 14. When I started this blog, Two Guys Metal Reviews, because I was living in France, and in Europe, when you go on school trips, it's not like a day trip; it's like a week thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, not gonna do that. Right? Like I like knew that like all these kids, no one here listens to fucking Swans, and I'm not gonna go be miserable for a week. That sounds dumb. So I pretended to be sick, got out of going, and my parents were like, well, you can't just like not do anything. So I started this blog with my friend, Heroin Dan, who's like no longer on heroin, but still one of my best friends.
I'm glad that he's not on heroin anymore.
But you know, love Heroin Dan. And But so we started this blog just as like a couple of kids, and then he sort of like dipped out on it relatively early because I think he was really more into the web design side of things and he wasn't into like the writing about bands. But I kind of kept it going, and I like slowly started to figure out like, oh, here's how you like write about metal, and here's how you like reach out to PR people and get to do interviews and stuff. And so I like, before I really had figured out anything about the music industry, I sort of understood I liked writing about bands, and I could see like which bands were successful and which weren't based on their social presence, right?
Right.
Because I could sort of like see what would get me more views, you know. And then and that's kind of how I ended up meeting you, right? It's because I meet you shortly after I moved to America, and I was interviewing bands in Psycho, California. I go to college, and I quickly realized this is not for me.
Okay.
But while I was in college, I was working part-time at this music PR company. And so I ended up dropping out and moving to Brooklyn just so I can do that. That company kind of falls apart after a few months because the guy got a divorce. And then I'm sitting there having to pay rent as a 19-year-old who's only ever worked in music.
In Brooklyn, too.
But what?
In Brooklyn, a place that it's not
in Brooklyn too, where it's expensive, yeah.
Exactly.
So what I do is I figure out, hey, well, a bunch of those clients from that PR company still want to work with me because a lot of them didn't know stuff I thought was kind of basic, like running your Facebook page or whatever. And so I just started to help them. And then it just kind of evolved piece by piece into, oh, hey, now I am, this guy. I started working with Ripple Music, and I started picking up a few other clients from there. And then eventually I started doing the daily advice videos because my friend said it might be a good idea. And very, very quickly that turned into a whole new level of thing. Like within a year, I was being flown places to speak at conferences. Within, I think, a year and a half, I was speaking at a conference in Australia where they had me at like this really nice hotel. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want.
Oh, hell yeah, definitely.
So it sort of emerged from that. And then, in terms of like the education or the background, it just emerged from having this blog, going to tons of shows, building up a community, and then just like really focusing on listening and learning from people. You know what I mean? And just like trying to surround myself with guys who've been doing it a lot longer than me, who had maybe a lot more wisdom than me, who I could go to and be like, hey, how do you do this thing? Or yada, yada, yada. And I just got really good at listening to those guys and really good at understanding like, hey, this is how you do that thing. This is what that's about. This is how you whatever. You know what I mean? And I think that was really the thing that allowed me to reach another level until it sort of became the Bacon's Bits thing we all know and love.
Yeah. Now the 1 minute format, is that is that limited by the medium that you're using or the platform that you're using, like that 60
It's
second?
sort of limited by the medium. When I first started doing them on Instagram, they were limited to a minute, and then I switched over to TikTok and they were limited to a minute. But now that's no longer a requirement. But I do think that going too much longer than that is counterproductive to what I do.
Right.
Not just because of like attention spans or whatever, because I don't actually believe in the shrinking attention span thing. I think that's a try hard myth. But I do think that what I'm doing is not entertaining enough to justify being more than a minute with my level of production value. I think someone like Jesse Cannon does really good 20-minute long YouTube videos, that are deeply informative, but he's also much more invested in the editing and formatting and all that other stuff.
Right.
I'm an asshole with an iPhone. I'm not really interested in being much more than an asshole with an iPhone.
There is something nice though about a 60-second like factoid, because I know like
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like when I try to learn languages, it's like you want to believe that I'm going to study, French for like an hour every day, but you don't. You do like 5 minutes at a time or something like that, and then it's more like the repetition as opposed to the length of the session, I think, sometimes. So you're doing like 4 1 minute segments every day. And I feel like that's probably a way more effective way of getting ideas out there than some long form piece. You know.
I think so too. I definitely think the quantity of what I'm putting out has a big impact. Um, yeah, and that's definitely been a priority for me.
Now, is there a lot of interaction, like with people that follow you and everything? Like, you put out these videos. Is there back and forth with your audience at all?
Somewhat, probably less than I'd like. Because I feel like a lot of the comments are just like good idea or whatever, which is fine. Obviously, I appreciate people commenting, but I don't have a lot to say based on that. Um, and then I get into interesting conversations with people like you or people in person who are like, "Oh, you're the Baconsmiths guy. Let me talk to you about this." So sometimes I don't know, but simultaneously, like there's a lot of people who follow for more, GM for private consultation, and that's turned into like a pretty decent sized business. Um, you know what I mean? Like, and that's kind of one of the coolest pieces of it is that I've been able to kind of turn educating the youth into I don't know, I have like 8 employees now. Like we're a fucking thing. Like people check it out.
Yeah, so
You know what I
I was
mean?
leading up to that. Now I was like, so as far as like
Like
monetization of the whole operation.
and I think I probably have higher monetization per follower than pretty much anyone else. Um, like across everything because I know how much like influencers with my amount of followers are supposed to make versus how much I make. But it's also because I think I'm a little more aggressive about the sales process than most people are. Um, but whatever. That being said, I also think there's a huge market of people who need fucking handholding. There's a lot of people who make music who have no clue what the steps are to put out a record, like zero clue. And having someone who will sit down and help you figure out from zero clue how to put out a record is really big for a lot of these people.
Well, I would say that most creative folks out there have very little. Um, they don't have a lot of notions about the business side of things or promotion
Sure.
or even, because a lot of people, if you make music or art or anything, you are there's a level of insecurity, I think, about the quality of what you're doing. Like
Sure.
most people that make music are like, they're reluctant to share it with people, really.
Sure.
And so there is this vibe of like, well, who am I to like, push this on anyone? You know what I mean? So whenever an artist is faced with promoting it, that always falls to the wayside just because of the built-in reluctance and sort of insecurity around it. So that's why someone like you is like an integral part
For
of that.
sure. And I think you also don't want to be. We've all met that asshole who promotes their music that's really not very good, and I think we're all terrified of being that guy.
Or even people that do make good music that are also very vocal about how awesome they are too. That's
Oh, 100%.
almost even worse than the person who's not that good trying to promote
100%.
themselves.
Yeah. And you're just like, man, we know. But yeah, but I think that it's just being a resource to people is important and just like sharing information is important. And I think that a lot of it is kind of shrouded for no good reason. And I think a lot of people in the music business are way too pretentious about the relatively basic knowledge they hold, you know? And also I think having someone who can explain it to you on a more straightforward level is important. I think one of my favorite compliments I've ever gotten, someone said, talking to you is like hanging out in your buddy's basement as he shows you how to do some cool stuff. And I'm like, yeah, that's the idea, you know?
Now, do you have like sponsorships or like what's the monetization model with what you're doing? Is there,
Well, so there's people hitting us up for like whatever services, like ad campaigns, marketing strategy, setup, whatever,
okay, right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting is that like a lot of like weirdly high level people watch what I do, right? We're all like, I was like in the Sony office and a girl came up to me and was like, "Hey, I got my job here because of you," and apparently like I'd given her a bunch of advice, and now she's junior A&R at Century Media, and that's really cool. You know what I mean? Um, and I feel like, and that's not to like brag about how great I am. It's just it's cool to see like the impact it has on that level, you know. And then that gets me like that helps me get into sort of the room for a lot of the things I get into the room for.
Right.
You know, there's also sort of this larger piece of like it's kind of at a point now where any metal label meeting I go into, at least one person in that room like has already watched some of my videos and like, shit, brother, if you're showing up trying to convince, you know, Sony to hire you to do some marketing campaign for someone, and two of the interns are like, "Oh my god, it's the fucking cigar guy."
The cigar guy.
That's really helpful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that's really like that really makes it a lot easier to go in and close that sale. You know, because they're like, "Oh, like the kids know who this guy is. Clearly, he's got something figured out." Do you know what I'm saying?
No, I do. I mean,
And
yeah, because it's a lot of it is, you know, things, yeah, like older people that have been around for a while, they don't understand the impact of things that they might deem to be a little bit on the, like, they undervalue the significance of stuff that happens on social media, basically, you know?
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's just wild, like the situations I've gotten into just because I, you know, like I realized once I started hanging out with my girlfriend in East Germany where she lives, like how used to like this sounds horrible, but like how used to going to shows and just like having in a new city and just having some random person come up and be like, "You're the Baconswitz guy," and me being like, "Yeah, okay, do you want to drink some beer?" And like not having to like, and then like what ended up happening is like turns out one of the main promoters in Dresden, huge Baconswitz fan. I was like, "This is great. Now we go to these shows," you know. And I just like it's cool to see the impact something like that has had and the power of just like and like I think the thing that people don't understand is like when you're in someone's face 4 times a day, that level of impact is a lot higher than even if you are, you know, a fairly known musician.
I would say that, yeah, for sure. Because I mean,
Because I'm just like there, you know, I'm just top of mind. Because I think where most people struggle when it comes to promoting themselves is they aren't top of mind, right? So when a big part of my strategy is omnipresence and being top of mind, which is to say that I want it so that anytime you have a music marketing related thought, you say, "I should hit up Matt Bacon." Because even if it's just to like share some knowledge or whatever, that is who I want to be. That is because I am trying to just own that space, right? So I want to be the first person anyone thinks of when they say, "Who, you know, oh, I have this music marketing question." I should be the guy you ask, right? Because that's the only way to really grow the business is to be that sort of market leader,
right.
you know. And as I'm sort of like in a position with the company where we're taking it from sort of a cool DIY company to I'm trying to sort of emulate something more like the Syndicate or Hyperculture or something, you know, one of these like bigger metal agencies, because I sort of I'm serving the same clients around the same services. So it's like I need to look like that. I know that the advantage I'm still going to have over them is I have much more brand presence than either of those companies do.
Yeah, because they're these kind of faceless monoliths. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're really cool and they do really good work.
Yeah.
You know, they don't need social presence because they're that good. I'm just some asshole. You know, I don't have the 20 years out of label and knowing everyone. And that's, which is how you kind of traditionally grow this type of business.
Yeah, exactly, dude. And also, you know, there's that complacency that comes with success in the long term.
100%. And this is something I struggle with.
Yeah.
You know, like there's definitely a piece of me that's just like, oh, okay, like I make enough money now. Let me just go on vacation and eat bonbons, and then I see, those end of month numbers aren't what they were supposed to be. Okay, clearly I can't do that yet.
That's so interesting, man. And honestly, I've always looked at PR as kind of like shark infested sort of like
100%.
yeah, where
100%.
there's always some like young buck out there who's looking to take away everything, you know, and you could even see it over the last, you know, couple of decades of like, you know, companies coming and going. Like this agency was like the hype agency for a number of years, and now no one knows who they are, you know.
Yeah, I also think part of that is because I don't really do PR partially for that reason, is I think that it's inherently sort of, um, I don't want to say, it's inherently sort of a tricky business because, 80% of your results, like 80% of the benefit rather, comes from like the top like 3 to 5 pieces of coverage. And I don't know the amount of value you're getting out of a lot, especially in metal, a lot of these smaller sites. And I say that as someone who runs a smaller site, but I run it for me, you know. And I think that like PR in and of itself is just, it's tricky. And if you're, and America versus Europe is also two very different things, but it's just, I don't know, like a lot of that stuff just doesn't make sense to me when you can pay, and PR is also expensive.
Yes, it is very expensive. Yeah.
I just swallowed a bug. God
Uh-oh.
damn it.
Oh no.
It flew right into my mouth. Anyway, that's my life. Eating bugs with Matt Bacon. But all this to say, like, on that PR note, yeah, I sometimes sit there and I go like, this is cool, but like, aren't you better off creating a bunch of extremely relevant content and then like running some very cool ads and like, rather than going and getting in, and this is not to like talk shit, but like Metal Injection, which has a very broad audience, if Tombs could directly just get in front of fans of relevant black metal bands, isn't that a better investment? I don't think PR is completely invalid. I sometimes don't know if that's where all the money needs to be going all the time.
Right. I mean, I brought PR up because what you do is adjacent to that, but it also feels to me like the way in the last several years, just the way that business is conducted and the way that things are done is like evolving and changing with this digital sort of society that we live in and the way that everyone has access to so many things at once, you know.
Sure, which is like part of the, especially over the pandemic, it really helped. It really showed how much the older metal scene is lagging when you look at how like a label like Maggot Stop was able to just crush everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In a way, and just like pick up every hype band is on Maggot Stop or Barbaric Brutality. Like that, or at least that's how it feels in death metal. Like that's what everyone under 25 likes. Those are the bands that are going to have a legacy. I don't see those bands going to some of these bigger guys. They will eventually. But right now, and what are those companies doing? They're using like hip hop marketing. They're like Instagram focused. They're, and that makes way more sense when you think about it.
Yeah, that's always been like the go-to when it comes to like, getting a high yield for like small capital investment, I guess. You know what I mean?
100%. And I feel like the way they do it is really clever. You're right, because they're like cultivating an aesthetic. They're not really like worried about a lot of the stuff labels traditionally worry about because they don't have to be.
Now, let me ask you a question about this is like kind of a generational thing, I guess. Do you think metal is still going to be relevant like going forward? I mean, I see young people. Actually, last week I went to see I Hate God and Goatwhore play.
Sure.
And I was astounded by how many younger people were at that show. I Hate God's been around for decades at this point.
And Goatwhore too.
Goatwhore too. They've been around almost as long as I Hate God. Really, I remember Goatwhore from the late '90s. And I was really reassured that that there's a lot of young faces there, because primarily it's always been like older people like checking those bands out. And with all the different styles of music that are coming out, trap is really big, or has been big for a long time. And how do you think metal fits into that with like newer generations?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I feel like metal got dramatically less interesting in the period leading up to the pandemic and right before and during the pandemic. And then it sort of came out swinging. Like there was definitely a point where I'm 27 now, and
Right.
up until pre-pandemic, I was perpetually the youngest person in Vitus by like 10 years, it felt like. And now I see like other young people or people younger than me in Vitus, which I always kind of use as the metric.
Right.
And I feel like this is for a couple reasons. First and foremost, the audience for broad picture, extreme, heavy music has grown significantly over the pandemic, in particularly because of TikTok and because of these labels that really understood how to use Instagram to promote themselves. You know what I mean? I feel like what's been happening is a lot of kids saw really sick live videos on TikTok, and then we're like, oh, I want to go experience that. And now suddenly the hardcore scene is bigger than it's been in decades, right? Because it's really, a live video of a hardcore show is really good at showcasing the benefits important to the client. It's really good at showcasing like, hey, you're going to go to this, you're going to get to punch someone in the face, it's going to be tight. And and so I feel like that's sort of happening. I feel like sites like Revolver are doing a really good job of sort of, again, bringing that sort of hype culture into the thing. I also think these things come in waves, and at long last, a lot of these bigger European metal festivals have sort of become okay with an Amon Amarth headlining, which sounds silly because Amon Amarth has been a band for 30 years basically at this point.
Yeah.
But that's a hell of a lot better than it was before the pandemic.
Oh yeah, man. I mean,
you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
The fact that you have Ghost headlining, Ghost's been around for literally like 15 years. Like suddenly we're starting to see, okay, there are these younger bands starting to like get a shot, and it's becoming significantly less cringe than it was, and the connections to hardcore and stuff are really benefiting it a lot.
Yeah, I real quick about Europe and metal. The festival scene over there, for the most part, is very traditional. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you'll have like your Iron Maidens headlining, and your Judas Priests, and those are iconic bands. Obviously, I mean everyone should listen to that music. But at some point, probably not too many years from now, we're not going to have those guys anymore.
Oh yeah, no.
So there needs to be new standard bearers,
And there are new standard bearers. It's just and I also think that like people bring up that conversation, but they do it from like one of the things I always point out is like there are new standard bearers, you just don't like them. Right? Like if you look, like my hot take is the most important band in extreme metal right now is Five Finger Death Punch.
Okay.
Because no other band who has gotten popular in the last 15 years has extreme vocals and isn't doing some retro sound. Like they're the biggest of any of those bands who have extreme vocals and are not retro. There's a few other things that are up there like Parkway Drive, but they definitely don't have the scope of a Five Finger Death Punch yet.
Well, actually, Parkway Drive, I think they headlined Hellfest, the main.
Not Hellfest, but they headlined Wacken.
Wacken. Yeah.
And they've definitely done a bunch of stuff. Like Parkway Drive is definitely like getting there.
Yeah.
For sure. But I also think that, so like but here's ultimately the thing, right? Is like Parkway Drive is, you know, gonna go and they're gonna play 3,000 tap rooms or whatever, which is cool, but they're not, they're certainly not Cult or Evil. They're not Lamp of Murmur or something. Except like when you think about it, Parkway Drive are a pop band.
Very much.
But when you think about it, like Judas Priest in 1976 is a heavy pop band.
Well, yeah, let's remember that in the 70s, metal was playing arenas. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Yeah.
And just like the type of songwriting, like, nobody really considered that. Like, they considered the metal. What did that mean? It just meant, it's like pop with guitars.
Yeah, heavy guitars.
Like there's
solos.
no like weird, like, like fucking like Suicide or like, I don't know, what's another like weird avant 70s thing that I think that you and I think is interesting. Like those guys don't play arenas. Those guys never did.
Yeah, like Throbbing, Throbbing Gristle or something.
Yeah,
like yeah.
I think it's silly to like think like, oh well, the underground bands I like should be headlining. It's like, no, man, like the equivalent of a Judas Priest is Parkway Drive. Which, like, whether you like it or not, is just what it is.
Yeah, that's an uncomfortable thing, man. That makes people uncomfortable to think that way, but it's the truth, though.
I mean, well, because like at the end of the day, or like even like if you want to go like for a respected metal band, like even like Lamb of God, right? Because like at least Lamb of God are like writing these big hooks, and it's like fun, for lack of a better term, and they're like writing with that in mind. And and I don't think all that has to be quote unquote bad in the critical view. I think a band like Gojira is going to be on that arena level pretty soon, and I think they're pretty broadly respected.
Yeah, I would say so.
I think that their ability to go from being like a real death metal band to all clean vocals is crazy, honestly.
Yeah, I definitely like Gojira, man. I have a lot of respect for them, and their music is interesting to me. Obviously, my bandwidth of listening goes way beyond extreme music, but so
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
so I can appreciate stuff that's not extreme all the time.
Yeah. No, and I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to like imply otherwise. Anyway. Yeah. So, whatever. There are new standard bearers. Most people just don't like them, and that's okay. I also think there's sort of this piece of like, those bands don't wear like patch jackets with Saxon on them because they're trying to appeal to like people under 50. So sorry, I guess.
Saxon.
And I like Saxon.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to talk shit. Like, I love all those bands. Like I have definite old guy taste, but like, come on. Like, let's look at this critically.
Well, I mean, it's the same criticism I have when I hear guys like Ihsahn talk about, or even Nurgle from Behemoth talk about how there's nothing interesting in black metal. And I'm just like, dude, have you listened to anything in the last like 15 years, and tell me that there's not. I mean, there's incredible bands coming out from all over the globe on a monthly basis. I hear of new albums that are fucking amazing. They're
it's for me. Yeah. For me, it's like, sorry, your friends aren't putting out interesting music anymore, I guess.
And these people too. I mean, as much as like I love, mid-period Behemoth, I don't think they've really done anything interesting in the last couple records, honestly.
I think what's interesting with Behemoth is sort of I really admire his willingness to be people's gateway to black metal, for better or for worse. But I think that to have that willingness is pretty cool and pretty exceptional.
Right, but his denigration of new bands doing...
Oh, yeah, that's lame.
That is completely weak, in my opinion. It's like you should try to encourage people to start their own bands and do their own thing and express themselves, instead of saying like, oh, well, it's all been done. Because it hasn't, and there's a clear picture that it hasn't all been done because of all these incredible bands I keep hearing all the time.
Yeah, well, yeah, just the impact of like something like Black Braid, where it's like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like that's, and it's like, and Black Braid is interesting because they're doing it in a way that isn't heavy-handed the way the previous generation of I don't want to call it folk metal, but I don't really have a better term, was so heavy-handed, you know. Or Lamp of Murmur is just like a great extension on a lot of stuff. I don't know. Yeah.
I haven't heard them yet, actually. Blackberry, I'm
Oh,
familiar
really?
with, but I haven't heard that other band that you're talking about. What are they called again?
Oh, dude. I'll send you a link.
Yeah,
It's
please,
fucking tight.
please do.
The new record is real good.
Yeah, are they American or European?
They're American. They're from California,
Oh,
which
okay.
is, I'm not sure how I feel about any American black metal, but I guess these guys get a pass.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always looking for new stuff to listen to and check out. And,
Yeah. No.
steal
Here, I'll get this over to you right
steal riffs from.
now. Yeah, you and me both. Anyway, sorry. So where were we?
Oh no, we were just talking about the new wave of stuff and the new way of things. I think that's kind of like what this whole conversation has been going towards. And sort of like the old stuff being maybe in the twilight of its lifetime. Maybe I'm talking about in the way that things are done. It's
Sure.
like back in the day,
Sure.
people used to send faxes.
Yeah, and now we're just on this other side. Yeah.
Yeah, now we're just in this other world where faxes are irrelevant and landlines are irrelevant, and that sort of thing. And yeah, it's just really interesting to me how things change, and
But
yeah,
I would say that I think a lot of the time it stays the same. Like I feel like a lot of this stuff, it feels different because the platform is different, but conceptually it is the same, if that makes sense.
yeah,
But by which I mean, like, okay, so like you have one of the best ways to blow up your band right now is to get featured as a hardcore band, to get featured on one of a handful of hardcore TikToks where they post really sick live clips from Hate5six videos, basically, or similar companies or creators. Okay. And it's like, well, that's like functionally the same as your cool live video getting onto MTV, and it's like literally being curated by a personality.
right,
You know what I mean? Like, and I just feel like that's, or like even like you could argue that tape trading basically exists in, I feel like that's part of why Bandcamp is so beloved, is that like you can be a music nerd with all your music nerd friends and just go on these Bandcamp deep dives and discover interesting stuff.
oh yeah, dude,
Right. And like
that's
a lot of guys
100%.
who I know who are like those guys in the 90s are like doing that now on Bandcamp, right? Like that's kind of what it is to me. It's that same mentality. It's that same tape trader thing. It's the same, this is just what I think, you and I are music nerds and sort of like early adopters. And that's not only are we music nerds and early adopters, that's a core piece of our identities.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I also love Bandcamp just even as a creator. Like I could write something tonight and have it out tomorrow, and it's
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and it gives you this flexibility and this fluency, and it's like, this is what we want, and it's just like, yeah, I don't know. But again, I just think all these things are kind of the same. It's even like with the ad stuff. It's like buying ads in one magazine versus another, like the clever guys, if you're promoting Tombs, you're going to go and you're in Europe where magazine ads really matter. Like you shouldn't buy ads in Metal Hammer. You should buy them on like one of the cool little black, Metalion or something, like where they're like focused on featuring black metal.
yeah.
Like, cause that's what helps. I don't know.
No.
But like, we just can do it better than we used to.
Yeah.
And it's more accessible, and it's no longer, it no longer has to just be white people.
Yeah, that's true, man.
And,
Well, Matt, thanks a lot, man. This is awesome.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
if anyone out there, if they're not following you, what's your handles?
Bacons.bits everywhere. Go check it out. I have literally 4 videos a day telling you how to market your band or music or whatever better. I've had a lot of people who are not in music tell me they help too. So, go give them a watch. Hopefully you learn something, or you make fun of my memeable personality.
Well, it's very entertaining too, as well as informative. So there you go.
That's good to know.
Yeah, that's our endorsement here at Everything Went Black. So
thank you so much for having me. I'm really glad I got.
No, it was a pleasure talking to you, Matt.
For sure, dude.